Yay, and here we are. So welcome to the July meeting of the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Would you like to start?
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, everybody, and I'll be in there.
Can everybody hear? Should we move the microphone around? Sorry.
My name is Doug Sims. I'm here as an interested neighbor and particularly interested in the areas of the borough plans for potential composting sites. I find that fascinating. I've joined these meetings a couple of times virtually. First time I had the opportunity to come in person, and very pleased to meet you all.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Pablo Garcia. I'm a Brooklyn SWAB member. I'm on the Organic Industry Committee and the Legislative Committee. I do academic research.
Excellent. Thank you. I am Rhonda. As I said, I'm chair of the Brooklyn SWAB. And the recordings are indeed retained, stored, and available on our YouTube channel. I've shared those before in previous announcements. The pattern is still in existence. So yes, you may go to our YouTube channel and find our past meetings.
Hi, I'm Bella. On the Brooklyn SWAB. I'm on the outreach
Committee.
Hello, my name is Frederick Phillips. I'm a master composter and a climate activist, and I think composting is the most granular way to become involved in climate activism because everyone eats and everyone creates food waste.
I'm Ann Basson. I'm a member of the Brooklyn SWAB. I'm on the events committee, and I'm an anti-plastic activist.
Hi, I'm Ezra Kenrick. I am interning this summer with both the Manhattan and Brooklyn SWAB and the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, and I am focusing on researching local composting feasibility and implementation.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lacey Tauber. I'm the Legislative Director here at Brooklyn Borough Hall.
Hi, I'm Debbie Herman. I'm a member of the Brooklyn SWAB and I'm participating in the two committees. And I'm also really into cleaning up our beaches from plastics and microplastics.
Hi, Beth Slemian, Vice Chair of the SWAB. Lots of other things, but we'll just stop there.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for putting your information in the chat. It's very exciting. We've got a big lot of information today, and I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Laura Orlando from Just Zero. Laura, I'm just going to read this out. Laura is a civil engineer, adjunct professor at Boston University School of Public Health, and a senior scientist at Just Zero, which is a national nonprofit which advances community-centered zero waste solutions. Her work includes research on toxic substances in municipal water and sewer systems and their exposure pathways, including technological, economic, and political influences with the overarching goal of pollution prevention. She's a co-founder and trustee of the Ecological Health Network and contributing editor and trustee at Barn Raising Media. So we're very excited to have you, Laura. Thank you so much, and let's turn it over.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here, and I appreciate the work that you do. I really don't know where to come in on this, right? So I don't know how much you all, for instance, know about how Newtown Creek operates. So my apologies if I hit this at sort of the wrong level of understanding for some of you. I'm gonna just kind of give an overview and of the co-digestion and what I think it means from environmental and public health orientation. And I want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. So three things come out of a wastewater treatment plant. The treated effluent, greenhouse gases, primarily methane and nitrous oxide, and sewage sludge. Newtown has, I think, 8 anaerobic digesters. So those digesters reduce the amount of sewage sludge coming out of the plant. That's one of their primary goals. Wastewater treatment plants, a 2023 Princeton study showed that the EPA lowballed the amount of methane coming out of wastewater treatment plants by twice as much as coming out than the EPA has recognized. In wastewater treatment plants with anaerobic digesters emit 3 times as much methane as wastewater treatment plants without anaerobic digesters. Whether we call these fugitive emissions or whatever, there isn't 100% capture of methane at wastewater treatment plants. So that's a big deal for what we're talking about today, because there's a, I don't know if it's a hopeful idea. There's certainly a lot of public relations work that goes into convincing the public that what goes into a wastewater treatment plant is what we flush down the toilet. And what comes out has been treated and made safe. Safe for public health and safe for the environment. And neither of those things are true.
Mhm.
What goes into a wastewater treatment plant is industrial waste, commercial waste, hospitals, road runoff, and what we flush down the toilet. That industrial waste component introduces, millions of pounds of toxicants, including, for example, PFAS or forever chemicals, which are actually manufactured in the wastewater treatment plant, because the building blocks to PFAS go in fluorotelomers and other building blocks from chemical processes that use those chemicals, and legacy PFAS like PFOS and PFOA, which have recently been added to the Safe Drinking Water Act rules in terms of trying to limit our exposure to them. There's no safe level in our drinking water of PFAS. And wastewater treatment plants, there are several studies that show 10 up to 19 times more PFAS come out in the treated effluent and the sewage sludge than go in. So just one example, the toxicants, the chemicals that go into a wastewater treatment plant that don't like the water, that are hydrophobic, will make their way over to the sewage sludge, the solids, okay? Sewage sludge is an unwanted byproduct of wastewater treatment. The better the treatment of the effluent, the worse the sewage sludge. I consider sewage sludge a residual of PFAS treatment, for example. Not all, but a lot of PFAS is captured in the sewage sludge, meaning it's not coming out the effluent. That's the same for other chemicals. You can guarantee that sewage sludge is loaded with thousands of chemicals. Right now, in the US, the federal government allows what they call the land application of sewage sludge in the NIPDES permit, including the NIPDES permit for Newtown Creek. There's the Part 503s of the Clean Water Act allow for the spreading of sewage sludge on land. I'm working very hard to change that because what we're doing is spreading PFAS and microplastics. Sewage sludge is loaded with microplastics. you know, the nightmare gets worse and worse, the closer you look. A friend of mine who's a toxicologist called it a toxicologist's dream.
Oh, God. Nightmare.
And the microplastics, like there's a lot of research about microplastics in sewage sludge, but there's more and more coming out all the time because now it's really in nanoplastics on our radar screen. And for instance, as the microplastics break down, they can, as the microplastics go into the sludge and then, for instance, onto soil, they can absorb toxicants like PFAS and further distribute them and just keep distributing them as they break down. So they keep on giving. And in terms of, you know, the sludge story, which has been out there since the Part 503s were promulgated in the early 1990s, the story being that sewage sludge is a danger to public health and soil health. The PFAS is really just added to that chorus, you know, because there is no safe level. So on one hand, we're telling people there is no safe level in drinking water, and tens of millions of Americans are exposed to PFAS in their drinking water. On the other hand, we're trucking this stuff out and dumping it on land because it's a cheap disposal practice. The people who truck the sewage sludge in New York and New England, all over the country, are the solid waste haulers. They're the Waste Management Incs., the Casellas, the Veolias, and they sign contracts with the wastewater treatment plant to haul that sludge away. It's up to them where they put it. So if Casella owns a landfill in Vermont, they own the largest landfill in Vermont, it's called Coventry, they're not going to want to put that in their own landfill, right? Because they don't charge themselves a tipping fee. So they're going to look for someplace else to put that sewage sludge. And if it's more often than not on some poor farmer's land. Maine has banned the practice. I'm talking about sludge here because when we're adding, I want us to get a picture of sewage treatment plants. And I want us to get a picture that can dispel some of the greenwashing that's out there about them. What sewage treatment plants do is they move waste, industrial waste, human waste away from water sources. That's the best thing that they can do, especially particularly rivers where people are getting the same water out. But in the 19th century, decisions were made by engineers, by medical professionals, by politicians, that it was the job of the water authorities to clean the water, and it wasn't the job of the people who were laying the sewers to clean the sewage. We really kind of moved into this idea of sewage treatment. The idea was just to get it away, right? Move it away. And we moved into this with the Clean Water Act in the 1970s and the horror of sewage pipes dumping what was aesthetically very unpleasing and very unhealthy into, for instance, the Boston Harbor, right? So Boston's solution to that was to implement what's called secondary treatment, which was mandated by the Clean Water Act in the 1970s. Secondary treatment uses oxygen to reduce the amount of nutrients, not chemicals, but nutrients in sewage sludge, which can alter an aquatic ecosystem. You put a lot of nitrogen into an aquatic ecosystem, you suck up all the energy, you can kill the fish, you grow plants. It's not good for the aquatic ecosystem. But what happens when you implement secondary treatment, you greatly increase the amount of sewage sludge in the plant. And that's what happened in the 1970s and 1980s. We had a whole lot of sewage sludge that we didn't have before. And so, you know, the answer was the story is a bit longer than I want to tell right now, but one of the things that came out of that is this business of beneficial use and land application. And here we are with that. So now we're in this situation, relatively new, of taking food waste and taking food scraps, bringing them to a central location. Think of it as a transfer station, though it's not really. Think of it, you know, as a location to be ground up with a liquid. The patent for this that Waste Management Inc. has, it's only says liquid, so I'm not really sure what they're grinding it up with. And creating a slurry, putting it in trucks, and bringing it to wastewater treatment plant and adding it to an anaerobic digester with the stated purpose of creating more biogas, more of the gas that's produced, the methane that's produced by the anaerobic process, meaning bacteria that doesn't use oxygen. As it breaks down the food waste and the sewage sludge, or attempts to break it down. For instance, there's not a lot of carbon in sewage sludge. It produces gas. And that's the fugitive gas I was talking about, or burned, you know, flared gas at wastewater treatment plants, the methane. What's in that gas, with or without the food waste, for instance, are always siloxanes, because siloxanes, a kind of PFAS, are high volume chemicals used by industry, and they volatilize in the anaerobic digesters. So I don't know if anybody's on the call from National Grid, but they don't like this stuff. Siloxanes create like a glass-like structure. They wreck equipment. They wreck pumps. They wreck metals. They wreck it. Terrible for public health as well. And I don't know the situation with regard to siloxanes volatilized around wastewater treatment plants. I know they've been measured. They try really hard to use, some places to use membranes to try to reduce the siloxane, activated carbon, for instance, which then becomes its own waste product. But I just kind of putting this out there because it's dirty gas and it's hard to work with. And I would explore how much is it National Grid for you guys, or Con Edison?
It's National Grid there.
Yeah, that one was.
Yeah, so National Grid, you know, my guess is this gas is a real problem for them. And the other thing to know, that besides being major wastewater treatment plants being major emitters of methane, they're huge energy hogs. I mean, I've seen one estimate 30 terawatt hours per year, US wastewater treatment plants. There's like 15,000 of them. There's about 30 of them that service 40 million people. 400 of them service half the country. So it's the big ones, right? It's like Newtown Creek. It's Deer Island in Boston. It's LA, you know, it's the big cities, as you can imagine, who have one or more. And these are the really big plants. They use, you know, it's the largest electricity user. Deer Island's, Boston's plant is the largest electricity user in New England. To give you some idea of what 30 terawatt hours per year are, it's more electricity than 140 different countries around the world use. It's about equal to Ireland. I mean, all of Ireland's electricity treatment. So when you hear, oh, we're going to provide gas for 2,000 houses, or we're going to, that treatment plant is just blasting through electricity,
Mm.
right? With the oxygen production I talked about for the activated sludge process, secondary treatment, pumps that they use, the digest, all of that stuff, the plant itself uses a whole lot of electricity. Something to just know. And so there are hidden costs to the co-digestion process. And one of the costs is the increased production of sewage sludge. Right now you have this toxic, you're adding to a toxic byproduct of wastewater treatment, which is 40 to 60% of the management of sewage sludge is 40 to 60% of the total operating costs of wastewater treatment plants in the United States. And now you're adding to that problem. And that's a financial cost. Then now you're also adding to the problem, the public health and the environmental problem of putting sewage sludge on land, on farmland, especially, but also bagging it and selling it to unsuspecting gardeners at Home Depot and such. There's no rule that you have to put biosolids, which is another word for sewage sludge, that you have to put biosolids or sewage sludge on the bag. What I tell people, if you see bagged compost and it doesn't say what it's made with, don't buy it.
Oh my.
And there are companies like the Coast of Maine that won't use it. You can also check with the company. But a lot all over the country, sewage sludge is bagged. Sewage sludge is composted, meaning it's added to, it depends, but a couple parts wood chips and sewage sludge, called sludge-derived compost is made from that. And then it's bagged and sold as like Earthgrow, Earthwise, Golden Nugget. I have a whole list of them. The names are almost always like that. And there's recent studies that show that stuff is loaded with PFAS as well. You look for it, you'll find it, and you'll find it in very high concentrations. So the story is not pretty at all. It's really not. And so taking a perfectly good carrot that somebody doesn't use and adding it to this environmental and public health nightmare really isn't what our planet or what our neighbors need. You cannot make a good fertilizer out of it once it enters the wastewater treatment plant. Once it is mixed with sewage sludge, it becomes sewage sludge, right? Really important thing to remember. So once that waste is mixed with sewage sludge, it becomes sewage sludge. It becomes part of that whole toxic soup. The wastewater treatment plant operators are doing their job to meet the NIPDES permit, which Newtown Creek has one. And that permit tells them what they have to remove from the effluent, right? So they're trying to hit nitrogen levels. They're trying to hit, they're measuring pathogens in that effluent. They're measuring the pH in that effluent. They are not measuring the amount of toxins coming out. Boston is just starting, Massachusetts, I should say, is just starting to look at PFAS in both the effluent, treated wastewater, and the sewage sludge, though there are no rules about it. I do not think New York State is, but if somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. But the point is the NIPDES permit, you don't have to measure, and you certainly don't treat for those things. And the sewage sludge, what is measured in the sewage sludge are 9 heavy metals. And And they're not looking for organohalogens. They're not looking for brominated flame retardants, for instance. They're not looking for microplastics. If they look, they'll find them, right? But so the permit itself is focused on nutrients. So there's no switch they can flip at Newtown or at Deer Island or at the Hyperion plant in LA. There's no switch they can flip to take out these toxicants, right? So when that food waste is ground up and put into the digester, becomes sewage sludge, it's always going to have, it's going to become a toxic product. And it will produce more methane. It does do that reliably, because there's more carbon in there. And the money train, following the money, we have found hard to do. The city of Cambridge does this, much smaller scale than New York, of course, but it's been difficult because the tipping fee is higher for the food scraps. The tipping fee is very high in Cambridge for the solid waste hauler to haul the food scraps away, which they call composting. They call the project, the program composting. Then they haul it away to a Waste Management Inc. site in Charlestown where it's ground up. We don't know what is paid. We haven't had any luck finding out what that costs, nor what the trucking costs to truck it 60 miles away to Lawrence, our largest EJ community, where it's put into the second largest wastewater treatment plant in Massachusetts. And all under the guise of a waste to energy program. So following the money is really important when we think of what's the cost of co-digestion and what's the cost of actually taking that carrot, those carrots, that food waste, and composting it, and actually using aerobic composting processes to make what is a non-sludge derived compost. I don't know. I mean, it's too bad we have to even, the compost has gotten so, we have to define compost, right? But I'm going to say a traditional compost, if you will. And there are costs affiliated with that, but let's not forget the costs affiliated with the management of sewage sludge, all of the things I talked about before, and they often are left out. The infrastructure gets built at the wastewater treatment plant through funding, say, for improved waste to energy projects, and that infrastructure might have gotten built over the last 10 years or something. And then when we want a transfer station or something to deal with making real compost, I like real compost better, making clean compost or real compost, we're often told, oh, we can't afford it, right? Or the money's not there. But keep in mind, money has been there to make this happen at the wastewater treatment plants, both to build the infrastructure and also to operate the plants and move those food scraps from one place to another. So I want to stop right now and just entertain questions and see what you all think about this and go from there.
I have a question. So is the siloxanes, that what you're saying that is added to work this process, but it wrecks equipment. So, right, that's my understanding of what you were saying.
No, they're a high volume chemical used in industrial processes.
Oh, okay.
And they're not
industry
impacted by the sewage, by the treatment. They're like many synthetic chemicals. They're not impacted by the sewage treatment process.
Okay.
So they come out of that process primarily in the sewage sludge.
Okay.
And when the sewage sludge goes into the anaerobic digesters, like at Newtown Creek, they volatilize,
Okay,
right? And so they're considered a major barrier to the use of biogas. And I'm sure they're working very hard.
great.
They're working very hard to try to separate those siloxanes, but it's a very, very messy process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an unpredictable process. And it's not tidy and clean the way we're thought
Right,
it is, you know?
right,
Like we capture all the gas. No, we don't. You know, that's that kind of thing.
right.
You know, this is great for homes. No, it's a nightmare gas. It has a lot of troubles to it. So I think just you know, sorting through and what's real and not real is really important for these kinds of things. Get through the greenwashing.
Yeah. Right. And so just as a follow-up, I just wanted to ask, so there are all of these chemicals that are sort of wrecking the infrastructure. And yet, and like, I understand the RFP that went out about producing this future. I don't even, Matt, maybe you could help me with this question about the RFP that went out that was like, could you, whatever company comes in to help out with this, can you work on, you know, you have to come up with some solution for wrecking the infrastructure. The
Basically,
pipe,
that's,
because
yeah,
of-
that's basically the nut, in a nutshell, yeah, that was the part of an RFP. I don't remember which one, but it's, the RFP said, you know, what is your plan for the extra corrosive nature of the biogas because their plan, I think, from the RFP is essentially to use the gas primarily to drive the infrastructure, the wastewater treatment infrastructure, not so much really put it down the natural gas pipeline, because you really can't. That's not such a good idea. But what you're saying is we're not drawing from that pipeline to power the plant anymore. We're producing it internally, but so we can mitigate and control and isolate the infrastructure damage from running the gas through the system, because we're not spreading it all over the city. You know, what's your plan to mitigate that, or to upkeep, or to help us maintain the equipment? So that was part of the RFP. I do recall reading it. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that was the gist of it.
I know, just, can you speak up a little bit, Matt? We're
Yeah,
having
I'm
people in the borough hall
yeah.
hearing you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is this
Yeah, yeah.
better? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I just had a question about, you know, this definition of beneficial use. So that's predicated on the idea of have we neutralized the biology, and have we regulated the nutrient levels in the material, and maybe looked at, you know, the traditional heavy metals, but we've excluded all of the other, you know, PFAS-like chemicals and medical waste and all the other things that find their way into randomly into biosolids. That's correct, right? When we define.
Well, we haven't forgotten. I mean, you know, we've ignored. That's a really
Right,
important
that's what I'm
point.
saying. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, in the 1980s, medical waste washed up on the shores of New Jersey and New York, and it was during the AIDS crisis, the late 1980s. And the popular press was all over it, and people were rightfully upset. And you know, hypodermic needles on the beach, how'd they get there? Oh my God, they're dumping garbage in the ocean. And what came out of that sludge was also dumped in the ocean at the time. New York took its sludge out on barges and dumped it in the Atlantic, and that got all caught up. Sludge got caught up in this realization that the ocean was being used to put our sludge and trash. And that's where the beneficial use rules came out of. If we're not going to put it in the ocean, what are we going to do with it? Let's tell people they can put it on land. It's been known all along that that the wastewater treatment plant doesn't remove these toxicants. It's not what they're designed to do. And so those toxicants have been ignored what the reason heavy metals, we pay attention to them is because they can have almost immediate effects. You
Mhm.
feed cows too much molybdenum, or feed with too much molybdenum or copper, they get sick and die. You give kids, kids eat lead, they have neurotoxic effects pretty quickly. We're not looking way, way down the line. So, and you can also sometimes do something about metals. You can find out where the discharges are. You can go upstream and try to deal with it, right?
Mhm.
Much more difficult with millions and millions and millions of pounds of synthetic chemicals. So they were ignored.
So-
And here we are.
So one other question to follow up on that is that, I've heard this in meetings and I've talked to people about this and they're like, well, we can mitigate some of the chemicals by using activated charcoal, like, this is what you would use in your fish tank. I'm not entirely sure there's enough art, that's one of the, we can use charcoal, we can use all these filters. I don't know if that works. Has anyone ever looked at that at scale? Is this a possibility or is this
It's
just
utterly impossible.
impossible?
It's Newtown runs something like 310 million gallons a day. I've read up to 700 million gallons a day when it rains. It's a heterogeneous, rich, it's not pure water, right? There's
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff in the sewage. And those, the carbon filters are only, they only can deal with a certain volume. The volumes are too great at wastewater treatment plants, and they have to be maintained. So you'd be swapping them out all the time. So it's not practical, even for one family of chemicals like PFAS, which has been strongly considered, right? We have to just turn off the spigot for PFAS. We have to keep that PFAS from going down the drain.
And then I don't want to cut you off because I
Yeah.
don't want to but I just want to follow up. Last question is, we do not want, so this is what I heard from your presentation and I picked up on. We do not want to mix good organic material into wastewater because one, we're increasing I guess the carbon load in the waste, in the biosolids. And we are sending that off to landfill where it will produce methane at a higher rate, or am I confusing this somehow? I wasn't quite clear.
No, so you're taking a perfectly good organic material that is not poison, which we know what to do with that.
Right.
We know how to turn that into real clean compost. And in what we're doing with it, when we add it to the anaerobic digesters at sewage treatment plants, is we are creating more sewage sludge. We're
Okay.
adding it to this existing problem that it is impossible to clean up the sewage sludge. Half of the sludge in the United States goes on land. Approximately half is either incinerated. Most of that is landfilled. So then you're just putting it back in the landfill, right? So you're creating a money train for people like Waste Management Inc.
I got it. Okay. I understand fully now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have just a couple of somewhat related thoughts. So just to be clear, the federal EPA or the state DP has like no standard for PFAS levels in soil to apply on that.
Sewage sludge or soil?
Sewage. So I mean,
No, neither one.
Okay.
Neither one. So there are no PFAS levels in they're not part of the 503s, nor are any other chemical.
Okay.
None.
And then another thing, not filters, but I also remember seeing somewhere that if you heat the digested feedstock to like a certain insanely high level, that you can like dissolve some of the PFAS. Has that ever been? I mean, I know that requires a lot of energy too. Has that ever been?
No, it's not. That's not possible. It's pyrolysis, for instance, or gasification. Does not eliminate PFAS. I guess my short answer. I have a much longer answer, but the answer is no.
Okay. Frederick has a question.
Yeah, after the hellscape of egg digesters and water treatment plants, is there an existing non-toxic alternative to them, or is there a prospective alternative that's non-toxic?
To
Water treatment that
plants.
doesn't, doesn't create more toxins and
It's a great
egg
question.
digesters.
I think when we think about the whole big picture, step number one is to stop the land application of sewage sludge. Let's stop pretending this is a safe fertilizer. Stop land application and think about ways to, which means that sewage sludge is going to go into landfills, right? Not a perfect solution, but something that's done around the country. Maybe they should be monofill landfills, meaning only sewage sludge. Maybe they should be publicly owned, so we're not under the boot of the companies like Casella and Waste Management. There's a lot of economic, political, social questions in there. And then reducing the volume of sewage sludge, which there is some pilots, some bench science on using existing treatment plants, using anaerobic side streams to basically reduce the volume of sewage sludge that's created. And I think that we need to have a robustly funded national program to look at how to reduce the amount of sewage sludge that is produced. We're working with 19th century technologies here, ideas around sewage treatment. What's new are like stainless steel chains and things like that. We're dealing with 1970s technologies in terms of trying to reduce nutrient loads. We need to really look at this whole process and figure out how we can, for instance, reduce the volume of sludge. And there are people looking at it, but it's boutique science right now. And not add more people to the sewer. It's hard to talk to people in Brooklyn about that, but around the country, look at climate change is going to really, really impact this conversation, because as an engineer, I'm a civil engineer. One of the things that we want to do is use as much gravity as possible. So where do we find the largest wastewater treatment plants? Near large bodies of water, on the ocean, on the shore, literally, of, closest to the ocean as we can get, because we've got an outfall pipe where we've got to discharge that effluent. And as there's more wet weather events like you guys had with Sandy, as there's sea level rises, we are going to be forced to rethink wastewater treatment.
I have a question. The acronym NIPI, what does that stand for?
Oh, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. It's aspirational, the elimination part. So wastewater treatment plants are point source polluters under the Clean Water Act, meaning unlike a farm, which is a potential non-point source polluter, say from fertilizer use or pesticides, wastewater treatment plants are considered point source, and so they're regulated with this NPDES permit.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that.
And by the way, in New York State, it's the state. It's not national. It's a state pollution discharge, because New York has permission, like a couple other states, to issue their own permits without going through EPA.
Oh,
Some states do that. They can petition the EPA to do that.
that is interesting.
So
Do you want to read questions in the chat? Okay, yeah. So we have a bunch of questions in the chat.
Yeah, great.
You want to go back?
Sure, I'm gonna go back to this one because there was some debate in the chat. Michael is asking, can wastewater treatment plants use the methane they generate to power the plant? And I had a similar question, because I kind of thought that's what we were told about Newtown Creek,
Mhm.
was that they were, you know, that the, whatever was being produced out of the plant was enough to power it. So is that not actually true in terms of their electricity use, and are they not self-powering themselves?
Many of the large wastewater treatment plants capture some of the methane and use it to run the lights or do whatever they're gonna do, to use it as part of the operational process. That is being done. Do they catch all the methane? No, they don't, right? And the Princeton study shows that. But yeah, you can capture some of that biogas and use it. Whether Newtown's is running their entire plant from the methane they're capturing, I doubt it, but I can't say for sure. I doubt it, but but it is done. I mean, some of that can be used. Listen, I mean, anaerobic digestion reduces the volume of sewage sludge, so capturing if we could really capture the methane and actually use it to run these plants without massive fugitive emissions, which make wastewater treatment plants one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, that would be great, but we're not doing it. And, adding the food scraps to this whole juggernaut is just, and it costs money to do, and money is being spent to do it. To this whole juggernaut is not helping the situation. Getting the food scraps out of the landfill is great. Good idea. Adding it to this juggernaut is a bad idea, especially when we know how to compost it. We can create jobs with that in all the boroughs, and we can create soil with it. And yeah, some of the compostable utensils have PFAS in them. There are ways we can look at that. Source separation is the way to go. And as closer we get as engineers and as ecologists and people who really care about making good compost, we have a much better chance when we separate that food waste out and then create the frameworks that we need, the infrastructures, the knowledge, the processes to actually make clean compost. And we can do that. But we can't do it once it's mixed up with sewage sludge.
Thank you. So Michael had a second question, which was, are silaxanes and PFAS a problem for anaerobic digesters that only handle residential food waste or only handle waste from dairy operations?
No, the silaxanes are there without the food waste. The food waste doesn't bring that. So the PFAS the PFAS is in there all the time. The food waste just becomes part of that mess once it's added.
But what if it's not co-digested? What if, like, instead of composting, it's only food waste going through the anaerobic digesters? Is that a thing that happens?
No, they wouldn't do that. I mean, that's not what they're doing. That's just not what they're doing. So you can have an anaerobic digester, say on a farm, or you have one in Brooklyn that only takes food waste.
Yeah.
That is done. That will make what's called a digestate. The end product. The carbon is going up the stack as methane. So you do that to capture the energy, the biogas. The digestate, you've driven off most of the carbon. So that digestate, you can't call that a compost. That's not what you want to put on your garden. The soil and the plants that want to use that carbon and the other good stuff compost bring isn't in that digestate. Anaerobic digestion should and could be considered in densely settled places and so on and so forth. I think it's a secondary consideration, but it has to be with animal waste or just food waste. The sewage sludge, the problem, you can't do it with sludge.
Right. Okay, great. Do you wanna?
Yeah, keep going. Vondra was asking, is there a claim of beneficial use of adding food waste to improve the biosolids?
Oh, to remediate it, meaning? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. They've been kind of nipping at this I've been dealing with this since 1993, thinking about it, researching it, and being part of community meetings and so on around the whole issue of land application of sewage sludge. And the sludge industry would love us to think that when we add food waste, we end up with like this composted or this great beneficial product, which is even better because we've added food waste. But it's not. It doesn't improve the process. It does create more gas.
Right. That's great. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
know.
Next question. If a company that processes biosolids for agricultural use claims that, quote, biosolids containing less than 20 parts per billion PFAS are deemed to be unimpacted by the industrial inputs of PFAS to the wastewater treatment plant, such biosolids can be land applied without special regulatory restrictions, end quote. And the question is this accurate? And to take it a step further, would vegetables grown in that soil be considered organic?
No. Any food grown with sewage sludge or biosolids, whatever you call it, the NOP, the National Organic Program standards prohibit the use of sewage sludge. So no, not organic. Number one. Number two, for instance, sewage sludge, remember I said it has loaded with microplastics? Well, the land around where the sludge is spread also has microplastics. So if you have an organic farm next to a sludge farm, it's bad news.
Oh.
44% of the microplastics in one study ended up in the adjacent land from a sludge spreading site. So, and 20 parts per billion? That's 20,000 parts per trillion. 4 is the drinking water standard, right? So we've never had, lead. The lead is 15 parts per billion. That's 15,000 parts per trillion is the lead level, right? We've never had anything where we talk about 4 parts per trillion. And that is the reason we're using that is that's what we can actually measure. The 0 is the maximum contaminant goal. So when we add 20,000 parts per trillion, it's a forever chemical. Love forever is good, but in chemicals, it's bad. And when we keep adding it, it bioaccumulates in the soil. Short chain tend to move to water. Long chain will stay in the soil. They'll go, different PFAS will go into the roots, shoots, fruits, and leaves of the plant. Depends on the plant, depends on the PFAS analytes, right? We can only test for 40 of them right now. But there are 15,000 and counting. So, but we know they stick around. That chlorine-fluorine bond it doesn't break. It's very, very strong. And so it depends on the analyte, the kind of PFAS in this giant family. All of them cause terrible harm to human health and to the health of wildlife and to soil health. And they go into plants and they go into water. So whatever idea, that statement that it's safe is just not to be relied on.
Yeah. Okay, this is one mic drop after another. I'm really enjoying this in a really awful way. Thank you. Is there another question?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a debate that's happened in the chat here that I'm wondering if you can comment on. The comment here from Kendall was that several states, including New York, have adopted regulatory and testing frameworks for PFAS, and EPA is still working on a national standard expected later this year. Greg has commented on that just having a known level of PFAS doesn't mean it's a safe level, and that science hasn't really determined a safe level. He also says that clearly the best solution is eliminate them upstream, i.e. quit making them. I'm wondering if you can comment on all of that.
Yeah.
You know, PFAS in what? What medium? I don't understand that. They're working on a national PFAS in what? The state? Is it water?
Kendall, can you be more specific on that?
Maybe.
It's biosolids is what he wrote.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, the state of New York has no, the state of New York is, they're on our bad state list. The state of New York is pushing land application, and so is the city of New York. And they have plans, solid waste plans to increase the amount of sewage sludge / biosolids that's put on land. There are, I have been looking and I have been asking New York nonprofits and activists about testing data, and no one knows of any in New York for biosolids. You can get the testing data from Michigan, in sewage sludge, Michigan. It's it's a little hard to. They make it difficult to get, but you can get it in Michigan and in Massachusetts, for example, and you can in New Hampshire has some good data. And then there's lots of peer-reviewed science, peer-reviewed published papers on this, lots of them. But New York State's talking about picking a number out of the air, like I forget what it is, 1 part per billion, or I think Connecticut has an advisory level of 1.4 parts per billion for farmers, that they probably they should have the sludge tested and not take it. If it's over 1.4 part per billion, I think of PFAS, I'm not sure. You got to remember, these analytes all add up. They're all bad, so you got to add them up like we do for drinking water standards. And these numbers are being pulled out of the air. There's no public health. There's great public health data on what happens when PFAS gets in your body. That's where we got the drinking water standards. That's why we have the Department of Health and Human Services and NIH and CDC and everybody else saying there's no safe level once it's in your body. And I just came from the National PFAS Conference in Ann Arbor, where I saw mother after mother get up on stage and talk about their 6-year-old with brain cancer, or their 8-year-old with the highest cholesterol level that has ever been seen in a kid. Right, from PFAS, like directly related to the PFAS in the water they were drinking. There's not as good of data. It's much more expensive, for example, to test for PFAS analytes in food. We have lots of science that says, oh yeah, it gets in there, right? But in Europe is way ahead of us. But in the United States, the EPA doesn't even have a testing program right now. And we're far, far, far from what's safe in food. So for New York State to say, yeah, we can spread this stuff all over land, as long as it has 1,000 parts per trillion, which is a part per billion, that's okay. At the same time, they're telling towns, yeah, you can't drink your water if it has 4 parts per trillion. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of stuff. I mean, this really, some of it is common sense.
Maybe has a question.
I have a question. I have 2 questions, actually. One is what happens during the rainstorms and the overflow? That's one. And number 2 is, because I'm a nurse, I'm very interested in the pharmaceutical waste picture. And is there any tracing of chemotherapeutics or radiation therapy in the wastewater?
Yes, there is. And especially there's quite a bit of stuff on steroids, estradiol, carbamazepine ends up in sludge. It loves moving over to the solids. That's an anticonvulsant drug that's pretty regularly used by the US population. You can find metformin, for instance, a diabetes drug, in the wastewater. So caffeine tends to go to the partitions to the water, so you can actually track septic tank waste and stuff from caffeine. So yeah, there's a lot of research.
Toxic, like things that are considered so toxic, like chemotherapy for cancer and radiation therapy, like, so if you go home with those therapies, you know, nobody should use the same toilet as you, but then it goes into our
Yeah.
waste, right?
It does. And you know what, you know, this is sad but true. This adage is still used. Dilution is a solution to pollution. Right? It's the idea that this stuff, well, it goes into millions of gallons of wastewater and it's probably not so bad. We don't look, the permits, the measurement of success at the wastewater treatment plant is not to measure how much of the chemotherapeutic drugs go into the sewage sludge and how much comes out as the treated wastewater. There's no measurement of that. The only people measuring it are scientists who are interested in that. And I could hunt and peck. It's one of my things I do for fun and find things like that. And, you know, probably find some good research for you. Someone has probably looked and found it. And, or by the characteristic of the chemicals, whether they're hydrophilic or hydrophobic, or whether they, you know, what they deal with, you know, all of their characteristics, because this is a giant chemistry set. You
Yeah,
could
and
probably
is
tell.
that as toxic? Like, how does that compare to PFAS? Like, you're exposed to radiation in your water. or
I
your
think there's,
water.
this is just a wild guess, but there's millions of pounds of PFAS and PFAS building blocks going into the sewer. There's not millions of gallons of this stuff every day of the chemotherapeutic drugs probably going into, you know, right. Yeah, I don't know. People aren't looking at it.
Nobody's
So,
looking. Right.
it could be worse. I don't know. And with overflows, yeah, that's, I mean, the overflow is it, you know, that it's a public health problems because now you've got the one thing that we can do is we add a lot of sodium hypochlorite bleach to the wastewater. It's bleached before it goes out into the Atlantic. That's what lowers your pathogen numbers. And so it's bleached. When it overflows,
Bleach is
it's not
toxic.
bleached.
Bleach
And
is
so then
toxic.
you have I know, but then you have yes, and then you have the trouble of people's exposures causing, you know, gastrointestinal problems and so on and so forth.
And New York City doesn't track that actually unless it's the summer months.
Really?
Yeah. Believe
Interesting.
me, I've been, yeah, in touch.
Yeah.
Wow,
Only in the summer months can you get that data.
wow, interesting. I just want to be mindful of time. First of all, you've been incredibly generous to talk with us and to have all of these answers. I feel like I'm really glad that it's being recorded because I'm gonna watch this over probably 3 times to understand everything and process it all. Maybe we'll make a study guide to this or something, but maybe we'd love to have you back at some point. I'm sure, maybe we could do a public session, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, somebody asked about industrial pretreatment. You know, there's a lot of words used in the wastewater world where it's like pretreatment, which sounds really good, you know, treatment itself, safe and effective, you know, capturing gas for energy. All of this sounds pretty great, but it ends up, you know, you open the black box and it's or you open the box and it's not so pretty. But you know, pretreatment is especially for processes that'll wreck the wastewater treatment system or add too many organics to it. Like landfill leachate, some wastewater treatment plants may say you need to pre-treat the leachate, which is the precipitation runs into a landfill that's lined. In Seneca Meadows, the largest landfill in New York State, depends on the rain, but it produces around 20 million gallons of wastewater. All of that wastewater has like the nightmare of chemicals in it, lots and lots of PFAS, for example, but you know, what leaches off what's in the landfill. And then they send that that leachate to whatever wastewater treatment plants will take it. Buffalo gets most of it, but they send it to 5 or 6 little plants in upstate New York. Whoever will take it, they'll switch year to year, whoever will take it. Pre-treatment in that situation for Seneca Meadows and other landfills, for example, of highly toxic material, is about reducing what's called the biological oxygen demand. It's about reducing the organics, because they think, God, if your millions of gallons go into our wastewater treatment plant, we're not going to hit our BOD numbers that the EPA looks at, the organic, the putrescible matter, right? The organics that's in there. We need you to lower the organics so we can hit our numbers. They're not saying lower the PFAS or lower the microplastics, or they're not saying that. So pre-treatment is very much about the wastewater treatment plant trying to not either wreck their process or not hit their numbers. It's not dealing with these toxicants that I've been talking about.
Wow. Well, really, thank you. Thank you so much for everything. And I
Sure.
would love to have you every week, every month.
Well, I'm available. Email me. It's been a delight. And don't put your carrot in the sewer. Let's make compost with it.
All right.
Good for the soil, good for the neighbors, good for jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we put this
For all of us.
recording on the YouTube channel, we'll call it "Don't Put Your Carrot in the Sewer."
Okay.
Thank you.
For the brown bin.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and you're welcome to stay, but we're excited because we've just gotten funding restored for local composting, so.
I saw that.
It's a
That's
good day.
wonderful. That's wonderful. And let's prioritize composting in New York City. That's what we need to do.
Thank you.
Prioritize real composting.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for your interest and your time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for your great questions. It's good to have these rousing conversations. Okay, so shall we move on to the update from the
Bye-bye.
president's office? Thank you, Laura. You're welcome to stay again.
I'm gonna jump.
Bye. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna actually just turn it over to Ezra to talk. You emailed out the criteria. to
Yeah.
everyone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think we have a ton of time for discussion, but just want Ezra to review quickly the draft criteria he put together for implementation of Info 696. We're looking for comments by tomorrow.
Yeah.
And to be sent to Rhonda and Matt, is that correct? Or to
Yeah,
Ezra
I mean,
directly?
like, people can comment on the side
Oh, I
of the
see.
doc.
The additions to the doc that are in color actually are comments. I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
so-
And there are
so
comments on the
comments,
side of the
comment.
doc too, which I'll just share with you.
Basically, like, you can, if you have comments, you can send them to Rhonda, you can send them to Matt, you can send them to Ezra, you can send them to me, put them in the doc, we're just compiling. But yeah. I'll
So,
turn it to you.
Can I just ask, so, I put on the agenda that we would talk about this at 8. Because, just to, and some people I think were gonna come at that time. Like they were timing it from other swabs.
Oh, okay.
So can we talk about it in detail?
Yeah, we
If
can.
that's okay?
Sure.
Okay,
I have no other updates.
okay. Thank you. So can we go with the coalition updates?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Very forceful speaker. She attacked co-digestion, right? And that's city policy. That's DEP's policy. And I wondered if they had been asked or whether it would be appropriate to ask DEP to sort of respond to this assault on the way they're managing this issue in the city.
I mean, we can give them an opportunity.
Maybe we should write a
Certainly.
letter,
There,
an all swab letter.
I mean, there was a debate, in the city between people who wanted to send food waste, for composting, which the speaker obviously wholeheartedly supports. I do as well, versus, putting it in the anaerobic digesters. And DEP
sort of led that debate, won that debate, and that's what they're doing. And so this, the speaker just assaulted that position, and maybe DEP's got some answers. I don't know.
Would you wanna add?
They're definitely, so, I mean, I think that they funded some studies that showed that when done properly, co-digestion is more carbon negative than compost, but that makes the assumptions that the methane is being captured and refined and then used as renewable natural gas, and that the biosolids are being either then applied as fertilizer or composted, which we have just learned is not really a realistic expectation. And I think that New York and other cities that are like heavily invested in co-digestion and sending organics to co-digesters are increasingly concerned about the biosolids, handling of the biosolids as a product.
Okay.
Anyway,
So-
I just thought, equal time, this is what the city is doing. And the speaker just assaulted it. And I'm just interested if DEP would respond to this speaker's basic points, including all the PFAS that's running through the system and being spread, and all the chemicals that are going through the system.
They're not going to respond, I don't think, unless we address it officially from the SWABs.
I see. Okay.
Again, they are not, even getting them to respond about the water, the bacteria levels and sewage stuff in the water. So I really think if we really want an answer from them, we should craft something and send it officially.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some degree, our role is to advise after looking at a lot of information, and then make it, make some kind of advisorial pronouncement or something. I don't, I mean, we can have an open debate forever, and you can keep saying the same thing over and over again, but eventually the city's going to have to reevaluate its policy. And I think that's really, part of our job is to move the away from the, back and forth, and maybe reconsider some of our policies, because they're not I think the best, I mean, obviously, there's no hidden magic to this. This is pretty cut and dry. And I think as a city, we really have to, wake people up to understanding that, that there is a lot of federal money available to build out wastewater treatment plants. And there's a lot of very exciting, talk around the idea of taking all of our food scraps and organics and putting them into digester eggs. And, and that's a very powerful, constituency, but, common sense and, open discussion, it has been very difficult to obtain and achieve. And, you're going to just hear the same thing over and over again. So I think at some point we have to stop doing it and just make a commitment to just saying, hey, we feel like this is a really bad idea, based on what we know.
Yeah.
And not what you're telling us.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could keep talking about this. I think we should continue the discussion, but in the interest of keeping the meeting moving forward, can we go to the coalition updates? Save our compost.
I think that's me, because I think Sherry's unavailable to talk right now. So I can jump in with that. As everybody knows, has heard, I'm sure that, I mean, biggest news is the budget update. Just to give folks a little bit more clarity on how this budget is going to work in terms of restoration of the community composting funds. The overview that we've been given is that the funding for restoring community composting is not coming through Department of Sanitation, but instead is coming directly from City Council, which is something called Schedule C. And that is where the funding is coming from. The council has made this a priority, and they are putting it into the budget in that way. So there's a lot of questions that remain in terms of how the funds will be administered. The other big piece of news that was really a priority in especially for the council in restoring this funding was that the number of compost project partners has been expanded. There's been a real push to include organizations that are BIPOC led. So there's a number of new organizations that are added to receive this funding, including Compost Power, which is funded through Green City Forest, and BK Rot and a bunch of others are on that list. So it's really exciting, but it's also still being figured out. You know, the ask was for 7 million, the actual received amount was 6.245, I think, and it's being spread out differently. So there will be more updates as that is figured out, but it is exciting news. The bad news on the Save Our Compost front is unfortunately from Big Reuse. There's been, you know, a huge push to try to save the composting site under the Queensboro Bridge. And Parks has still not budged on this. There was a rally last week on Thursday that was really the last attempt. And in spite of all of the efforts on support from leaders, Parks has still said no. And I think the takeaway, you know, Anna from Save Our Compost really, I think, put it well in just identifying that the leadership in city council really understands the priority to compost. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that the same way from Parks in particular, but you know, and we could be certainly could work with them and be allies in this. So that is yes, there's a lot of questions. I see your question, Kendall, in the chat, and Mary Ellen's answer. I don't know a lot of answers in terms of the administration of the funding yet.
I
But
can answer that.
you can talk about
In
that. Great,
Schedule
Lacey.
C, it was specifically noted, so council doesn't give the money itself. For anything it does, it allocates the funding to an agency to then fund to the orgs. And I noted that they allocated the money to DSNY to give to the orgs. So that means DSNY is still gonna be obligated to do this contracting. I'm pretty sure that's right. I will double check, but
Okay, that's
yeah.
helpful.
I noted that because I know we had talked about trying to get them to move it to like DYCD or another agency so that we, I don't know, could sort of bypass sanitation in this process, but it doesn't seem like that happened. So yeah, sanitation will still be involved.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer on the capital funding, Mary Ellen, if anyone else does. Yeah. Your question, Betty, on the Big Reuse site, well, Red Hook Farms also was included separately as another partner to be funded through this. So yeah, as Mary Ellen was saying, so that will be there. That much I know. So there's a lot of knowns and a lot of unknowns. That's where we're at. But overall, good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Has Big Reuse look for an alternative?
They are.
Go after.
Yeah, they are currently working on finding an alternative site. The unfortunate piece is there's going to be a real break in the operations, you know, in order for them to find a site, build it out, you know, work with it, and they already did that. So that's the real unfortunate.
Right. Okay, great, thanks. Reusable NYC, is that Louis?
Yeah, the meeting was canceled for June. It's also canceled for July because there's no movement on that legislation.
Right, they're looking for a sponsor, right?
I think, yeah, it didn't seem like that was been nailed down yet.
Okay. Okay, executive committee. So, I'm sure everyone read the very thorough notes that, we sent out that Mary Ellen took. Should we move to approve those notes? Do we have a quorum?
We have a quorum as a few minutes ago. Let me make sure that we still do. Yes, we do.
Okay, yes. Does anyone move to approve the notes from June?
I move to approve the notes from June.
Pablo, do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you for seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone? I'm sorry. Okay, is that everybody? Okay, all right, thanks. They're approved. Okay. Do you want to?
Any no's or any abstentions?
Yeah, any abstentions? Or any no's? Okay, thank you. Beth, would you like to talk about membership?
Oh, sure. I would love to talk about membership. You wanna throw that mic
Yeah.
back there? I'm just gonna do a quick general update on membership, and just some reminders. It's nice to see everyone who's here, especially, there's a few folks who I haven't seen in a bit, so I'm glad that you're here. As a reminder to be a member of the SWAB in good standing, the criteria is to have attended 6 meetings in the last year, which is really 6 out of 11 since we have 11 meetings per year. We do keep records of this. If your membership standing is starting to is underneath that 6 per year, I'm going to be doing a little bit of membership outreach this summer during our break time, so I'll reach out to you. I can speak for myself, but I think Rhonda feels the same. Like, we want all of you to be here, and we like it. So you know, we don't really want to like kick anybody off. We just want to make sure that you're attending enough meetings to be a member in good standing. So we'll just check in on that. And then the other thing is new members. I see a few folks here who've been to a number of meetings recently. If you are not a member and have attended 3 meetings in the last 6 months, that gives you eligibility to apply. The application is online. I meant to grab the link for that and put that in the chat, but I definitely have not done that, but maybe someone else can. It's on our website. And we encourage you to apply. Once you hit those 3 out of 6 meetings, you'll also be invited to join our members and regular guests email list if you're not on that already. Some of you might have already been on it for other reasons, and that's fine. But in that, I've been adding a little plug to join us and apply and become a member. I may be reaching out to some of you more directly as well in these summer catch-up months. So join us. As Sherry and I like to say, we at the Brooklyn SWAB are the most fun SWAB. Yeah. So you should come join us because we have fun in our talk. And that's my membership spiel.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. Legislative committee updates.
Yeah, so we met last month and we had a long discussion about the survival of composting, community composting in New York City. And we had some actions that we were going to do, but thankfully we don't need to because the funding was restored. We also talked about the packaging, the PRRIA bill in the that went through the state Senate, and did not make it through the Assembly during this year's New York State legislative season. And there is some talk of a potential for a special session to address that. Of course, we want to do whatever we can to kind of nudge people into actually to make that special session happen. So Rhonda and Mary from Queen SWAB put together a letter and an email and as well as some talking points so that folks can give their assembly member a call. So we're going to ask all of you in your free time if you could make a call to your assembly member and nudge them to support a special session so that that piece of legislation can be addressed in the assembly and hopefully pass this year. So we'll send that out after this meeting, and yeah, so all the work is done for you. The letter, the letter is already written. All you have to do is give your assembly member a call, and we're hoping to track that as well, so we can see which different assembly members have been reached out to, et cetera. But yeah, that's what we did last month, and then hopefully we'll see you this month. I think our meeting is 3 Thursdays from now, I believe, and yeah, we'll hope to see you there. Any questions, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of that. Okay, outreach.
Oh, it's that's me again, unless Sherry's able to talk, but I don't think that she is. Okay, I have an update from Sherry that I'm going to read. Okay. At our last outreach meeting, we discussed that the committee had a meeting with the sustainability team at New York City Public Schools. And we're awaiting another meeting for next steps on that topic. That was like an education kind of subcommittee, I'll add. And then for our community board work, we're working on a plan for outreach to community boards around their statement of needs that is due in the fall. And we'll be using our next meeting to deep dive on this topic. Social media work is on par and excellent as usual. Thanks, Lee. I'll just add that. And the next outreach committee meeting is on Tuesday, next Tuesday, July 9th at 6:30. And you can email Sherry if you would like to be involved in that. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Organics industry.
Oh, I guess that's me. Well, we have our meeting. I know we talked a lot about organics already, so we have our committee meeting next Monday. Definitely encourage people to join. You know, we'll be talking about the legislation 696. The siting survey. There is a new what's it called? The White House issued a strategy to keep food out of landfills, which I haven't read yet, but that's something that we should all dig into if you're interested in that subject. I know I've kind of been circling back to trying to connect climate change and rats to organics. I don't know if I mentioned this at the last meeting, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. You may have seen Councilmember Shai Ase gave a citation to the rat killing dog. Did I already talk about this?
No, you didn't talk about it here.
Okay, I'll just mention it quickly. So, basically saying, applauding these people that go out with their dogs, to kill rats, and that's the solution. That's a great solution to controlling rats. Really, and I contacted his office, because a number of reasons, and they said I was the only person that had contacted them about that. And of course, they said most people contact us about rats. So, so the point being, this, the real solution is to put the rats' food into the brown bins, and all of you in Brooklyn have curbside service. So I'm trying to figure out how to get that message out to more council members. We have some graphics that connect both rats and climate change to the need to increase composting. I don't know if the borough president's office might think, I wonder if you guys just think this is something that could gain traction, especially I consider, it's summer. We've already had it's like over 100 degrees from the beginning of June. We now have the earliest Category 4 hurricane in history. I mean, so people are going to be talking about climate change a lot in the next couple of months. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to insert the messaging of, how you can really try to make a difference on climate change by doing the simple thing, by diverting your food waste. So yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. If anyone thinks, I would just be interested to know if anyone thinks that's a good idea, bad idea. If anybody thinks that could get any traction, tie in with the people that have climate anxiety,
Yeah.
And you never want to throw dogs at rats, you throw cats at rats. And the
Yeah.
dogs are not gonna kill rats, so
I
I
mean,
don't.
there's also, yeah.
I'm gonna
there's-
call his office and tell him he's really wrong about that. We need more stray cats.
I can,
Yeah. I mean, terriers, that's what terriers were for in the castles. They were there to kill rats.
Oh, they would sniff them out and kill
And
rats.
kill them, yeah, and like,
Okay.
yeah.
Just- Cats are very effective. at
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
you can catch all sorts of diseases.
Cats
you
will
know,
kill
your
rats.
dog-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is it's
Cat gets in
bioaccumulation, the
there.
poison bioaccumulates, so,
kill the dog.
yeah,
Right, or the cat.
right. Okay, so is that it for the?
Yeah, I'll put links to the Luna story, the Shiase story in the chat. If
Yes.
people want to see the press that got picked up.
It's Chi, by the way,
Yeah.
Chiose.
Chiose.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, she? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Chiose.
Just in case you call.
Yeah, just.
I didn't talk to him. I talked to people in his office, so.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, events committee? Liz? There was a fun event that I missed, I'm sorry.
It was fun.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, there was a fun event that you missed, Rhonda. And everybody else that couldn't make it. We met at Kingland Wildflowers, the green rooftop next to the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant. The rooftop is operated by Newtown Creek Alliance, and they were on site to talk about the roof, and it was just, you know, such a beautiful view, just like this like beautiful green roof surrounded by like all this industrial like trash and recycling and wastewater infrastructure. It was like really the perfect place for a SWAB social. So thank you, Debbie, for suggesting it, and I'm sorry you couldn't make it.
Yeah, I had a private tour of that place once. That's why I thought,
Mhm.
like, perfect,
Mhm.
perfect place. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So if you have any other suggestions, where to meet up, I think Governor's Island was mentioned as a place, but again, it takes the ferry to get there. But there will be.
Is
Huh?
there a cafe there or anything?
Oh, there's food there.
And lots of hammocks.
Oh.
But the next events meeting will be Wednesday, July 17th at 6:30.
Okay,
And I'll put it in a chat.
okay, thank you. Do we have, NYCHA committee? Any? I don't think that she's. Okay. Well, Matt's back to the reading room. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now the event we've all been waiting for, the compost siting criteria discussion. Hi, Aileen, look, here she is. Okay, so please, Ezra, maybe we should move the microphone.
Sure. So I've compiled this this doc as sort of a part of a response to Intro 696, which there's a there's a little brief on the intro at the top of the document. Essentially, it's looking to build compost sites in each of the 5 boroughs, and these would be the hope is that these would be a mix of different size facilities, different operators, and the current cumulative capacity the bill is aiming for is 180,000 wet tons per borough. And so there's been a lot of attempts in the last 20 years, but even longer in the city to site composting facilities with minimal luck. But the hope is that, that as there have been various changes to zoning, as well as financial support, and general community support, that, we're going to be able to find some sites for facilities. And so this is a document that has outlined a lot of criteria for facilities, and we're hoping to implement it in sort of a mapping project here to look for facilities. So if anyone has any comments, I've sort of organized it, at the beginning of the doc, is essential criteria in order to be a permitted site by the State Department of Environmental Protection. And then there's also other criteria that are sort of tangential to permitting approval, as well as just things that make it much easier to compost. And then some ideas of sites or land use areas to look into. And then once sites have been identified, other considerations. So yeah, I mean, we've asked for feedback by tomorrow end of day, but if anyone wants to discuss anything now, I'd be happy to talk more.
Beth has a question.
Can I ask a question? There's a lot on here on the requirements of how far things need to be from certain things, but is there anything identified in terms of minimum or maximum size of the site itself?
So the majority of the distance requirements stem from, the distance requirements are a result of DEP either permitting or registering requirements, and those are triggered based on size of the facility. However, so there are then like further complications if you accept meat and dairy as well. But generally it's going to be like 500 feet for anything that would be permitted.
But then what kind of size space are we looking for these sites? That's what I really want.
Oh, so it's by tonnage or per year that's processed, not by square footage.
Right, but as you're
So
looking.
I think various
So-
sizes.
I think that Sandy in the hearing that mentioned that what they're really wanting is a mix of like small, medium, and large scale, though didn't define that exactly. I think we made the choice to look in terms of zoning into the MC8 and C4 because that's where we think we can, they in the city of Yes for carbon neutrality, they started to permit composting facilities as an auxiliary use in residential zones. But we're talking pretty small scale there. To get to this number, we have to start with something like reasonably large, although we don't have exact numbers, like it needs to be XYZ to get to this. I think we're still trying to sort of zero in on that, but we're focusing on where we could put larger scale facilities than you could find probably in residential zones, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and generally also, we're the only like gray area in terms of zoning that we are looking more into is parks, because those are zoned as parks, and it's sort of unclear about their openness to composting and also the legal angle of it, but we're looking more into that. But it seems like just looking at the zoning map, like which I'll have posted a screenshot of in the doc, it just most likely places that are not already developed with residential land are going to be in the M zones or C8 or C4. So when we're talking about like medium or larger scale facilities, they most likely will naturally fall in those zones.
Yeah. And just to answer Kendall's recommendation to contact Emily from City of Yes, we actually have put him in touch with Emily. She reshared her presentation, which was actually quite thorough.
I didn't get.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so I was wondering why you didn't chime in on that. Okay, so so she is in touch, and there's a meeting coming up, and she spoke actually not at the Brooklyn SWAB, but at the Manhattan SWAB, unfortunately. So we also.
And I mean, I've also just been looking into the Institute for Local Self-Reliance on their job and economic analyses as well, which is another thing that we're working on simultaneously. But we can look more into their zoning.
Yeah, I connect you with Brenda also.
I would just add that I think, the takeaway in terms of your ideas, just, from places you can think of or things on the ground is this list of possible starting places. I mean, I think we know that there are, in terms of complying with this bill, Staten Island done, right? We have obviously been advocating for the renewable Rikers plan. There's already a facility there. There's there's some debate about whether that counts as Queens or the Bronx. So we're still figuring that out. There's a facility in the Bronx that does just yard waste. So there's actually more already compliant sites than you think. But then in terms of looking at some of these other ones, like the list that's here, brownfields is a big one. And parks, as I think what I have advised is that we want to do one list with parks and one list without parks, because as we know, that's just like an ongoing conversation. But yeah, if you have ideas for potential sites that others should look at while we're mapping, that would be helpful. And sorry, Eileen has questions. I didn't mean to jump ahead. Eileen, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hi. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So I guess, sorry if I like missed this either in the written, what was sent us in writing or just now, but could someone explain the framework around this? Because obviously this is like a great mission to like find new sites. But I guess I'm wondering just from a practical standpoint, like, is this something that DSNY, like Tish or someone at DSNY knows that we're working on? And if so, like, are they, with the curbside composting, becoming a reality citywide, hopefully soon, is this something they're going to actually like contemplate doing? Or is this just kind of pie in the sky thinking of like citing these new locations, and we have no idea how likely it would be that they would, for example, start to take some of the orange bin compost of fruit scraps and actually like, bring them elsewhere to like a better place than they're being brought to now, where they're going into the waste to energy situation.
I mean, to answer that, this is sort of in tandem with the intro, which were it to be passed would require them to
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you too well. Let me try to put
so
my
is that, I don't know if, is that
yeah,
anything?
it could be my end as well. So go ahead. Sorry, could you say that again?
So this is in tandem with the intro and sort of trying to map out more specifically how it would be implemented, as sort of a vision for were it to be passed, how to work. And if it were to be passed, then yes, this would require DSNY to build these sites. The intro itself doesn't have any requirement of them utilizing the site, so that we would assume that that they would, because they would have the capacity and it would be beneficial for them to. So that's sort of a bigger background framework.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I would think that, obviously the Staten Island facility is terrific. I went there as part of a tour. Maybe a few of you were there as well. Would be great if they could have more of that. I mean, they said they were expanding that as well, weren't they? I don't know. I saw like a press conference that Mayor Adams did earlier this year saying they were. Does anyone know the status of the expansion of that site, and whether like more of the food scrap drop-off sites like would be,
100%, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Something like
But it's
that.
not coming from us.
And it's not, and it's well, part of the goal of this intro is also that it's pretty far to truck all the food waste there. So
it's what? Sorry.
It's pretty far to truck all the food waste.
Right.
So it's about
Yeah.
waste equity, right?
No, that's not correct. They have expanded the
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's already been.
Yeah, it's already been expanded and they're taking a
Okay.
portion of it there, but they're also taking a portion of it to Newtown Creek.
Yeah.
80%.
Yeah.
Wow.
80% is going to Newtown Creek and 20% is going to
Yeah.
that net.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what they've said
That's
in
what
the hearing.
DSNY said, yeah.
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 Got it.
I have two questions about this.
Thank you.
The places, so number one, like public parks, is that like a political issue? Because like the Domino Park, years ago, there was private money that put a composter into Domino Park. So, you know, that's like a win-win. People are eating tons of food in the park and
But Domino Park is private, isn't it?
it
Isn't
is,
that
but
David
they
Blaine?
have a composter there. I
Right,
mean, you
yeah,
can
yeah.
have a composter, the
Domingo
right
built.
size composter in any park, you know, there's so much land in the parks. So is that a political problem? That, like, why would that be a problem?
I mean,
we
so,
don't know.
yeah, there's generally just been pushback from parks to compost
Parks
inside.
Department.
Yeah,
I mean, one of
So
the
that's
reasons,
a
as I
political
was
problem.
just saying, we want to do like two potential lists and one is with park use and one is without, because I mean, there, when in the letter that Park sent to Big Reuse, it said, we think composting is not compatible with public park use. So that's a political battle that we have to fight on a separate front from this. And that's why we don't want to rely too heavily on it. We want to show it's possible with it, it's possible without
I
it.
have a question about that. So do they give any explanation? Is it rats? What is it? I mean,
there's a couple, I mean, they say, yeah, like rats, smell, I mean, I think that they also have like,
Space.
yeah, exactly, like conflicting, that
But
they,
there's so much food waste in the
It's
park.
Parks
yeah.
and Recreation. It's Parks and Recreation. They consider that an industry,
And-
industrial process.
Oh, I see.
yeah, and, yeah, I mean, and they also, right, it conflicts with like other priorities that they might have for their land use. And there's been like pushes on the legal front, like there's been a co-signed letter between the New York Bar Association, the NRDC and NOPE that says that it is legally compatible. And that was in like 2018, and clearly they're not compliant with that. So it's definitely a fight.
They've been fighting that on multiple fronts. I mean, with the Ecology Center and their ability to return to East River Park with Big Reuse. So yeah, that's part of this conversation, but like it can also, I think, be a distraction from getting to where, because basically to elaborate a little bit on your question, Aline, like, yes, sanitation is definitely aware of this bill. There was a hearing, they testified on it. And what the commissioner said was that, you know, implementation is not feasible because it would be too expensive and that they couldn't possibly find land to do this. And so, you know, maybe we'll get to the point where we say, okay, maybe it isn't feasible to find 180,000 wet ton capacity in each borough, but I'm hopeful that we can. And like, this is the process we're going through to do that, to show them that, that it is feasible.
Right.
We have
Oh,
the
that's, go ahead.
two food markets, the one in Brooklyn and the one in Hunts Point. What do they do with their food waste? Because I'm sure they have a lot of discards.
Yeah, so this is all with regards to residential food waste rather than commercial. That's a whole other side that's being handled by private carters and things like that. The goal is that as we build these sites, then there might also be a possibility for them to process commercial organic waste as well. Yeah.
Right, that's one of the things, is that maybe this capacity seems like a lot compared to like what they're actually picking up right now. But the commissioner also testified at that hearing that she wants a bill and like had it in her hand to work with council to require commercial establishments to source separate organics. And so if they do that, there's going to be a lot more going into the system. So, you know, we just like would like to see more of that going to traditional compost methods and not 80%.
Yeah.
Especially because, I mean, for us, having worked on waste equity to try to get trucks off the street in North Brooklyn, putting as many trucks as that would require, you know, it's already putting a lot more trucks back into North Brooklyn, but the more capacity, the more scale up, the more trucks, like we want to see a more equitable system where it's distributing around the boroughs.
But what about brownfields? Like, why would that be a site where you would want to put compost?
There's great, yeah, there's a lot of grants to develop them. So to also go back to respond to Kendall's question about public versus private land further down, and then the first part of this, sort of the before we get to the possible starting places to look, is sort of all with regards to like the actual feasibility of the physical site, and then there's some decisions about economics as well. And so brownfields, I mean, there's this cost consideration area and the notable decisions, and that within that is sort of the initial cost to build out the site, and there's a lot of grants for brownfield remediation. So there's state and federal and city grants actually in order to, if you clean up a brownfield, there's tens of thousands of dollars that you can receive in grants. Other grants that we're looking at are like co-siting grants with solar, or also co-digestion.
Yeah, they're wrong. We
Yeah.
got a lot of work about co-digestion, right? Federal and local, federal.
And then also just to respond to the organics committees, I forget who it was that was speaking about that. Yeah, Allison, but the Institute for Local Self-Reliance has done an analysis of that as well. And it seems like that there's, I think, I don't know, like 275 million, if I think is the correct, yeah, 275 million from the EPA that is given in grants for the solid waste infrastructure for the recycling grant program, which includes capacity building for more decentralized composting. So you know, I guess a lot of IRA things are unclear still, but that is a part of it.
Can I just ask one quick question or about a location? What about under the BQE, like, or any of these spaces under the highways? Is that a possibility? Is that like whose land is that? Because I just think about like under the Queensboro Bridge worked for a time. Like we have all the space underneath highways.
Yeah, I haven't looked into that yet, but that's a good idea. Yeah.
Keep them coming.
And I just had two other quick things, if it's okay. So, you know, the city is like rolling out this supposedly universal program, but what is the roadmap for it? And can this be like an input, like, can then the legislation about universal composting be an impetus for them needing more capacity, like more sites? Like, can it drive this to necessity? Because how are they gonna, do they have a plan in place for how they're gonna do this? Because my building has absolutely no idea how to do food scraps diversion, zero idea. And I've talked to them about it and they have no interest in it. And their answer is, we're only gonna deal with it if we get fined or penalized or something like that. Then at that point, we'll do something about it.
They
Did-
will.
So
get
just,
fined
Well,
25 bucks.
well, so I mean, there's, yeah, we don't, I mean, theoretically, there's enforcement that's coming into play in next year. Who knows how they're going to do that, but hopefully they will in some way. And yeah, I mean, Commissioner Tisch has said that there's an RFP out for organics processing. I think that we haven't seen that, we don't know, yeah, it doesn't exist really, but she said that it does. And I think their goal is to build out capacity through a mix of co-digestion sites as well as compost sites that, you know, would be, we don't know whether they'd be local or outside of the city. Because also as of now, the city does send some of its organic material to some composting sites in New Jersey and Massachusetts, I believe. But not as but
yeah, and sorry, that was a larger point, but it befuddles me a little that, I mean, it's great, universal, but if there's not an implementation plan, that's going to be problematic. My other question was related to this, the grant stuff that you were mentioning before. Could we use that Biden administration strategy press release, you know, like that idea to like look for like federal grants? Like, would there be more federal funding perhaps that aligns with that strategy that they just announced?
Well, we're not really looking at funding, we're looking at sites.
Yeah, but just as a follow-up, that's what I said when I was reading that 275 million. That's, I think, the main chunk of what they highlighted in that statement in terms of federal grants for compost
Okay.
activities. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Does your handout have the way we can communicate with you for feedback?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put that in, but yeah, so my email that you can email is my first name, my last name, so Ezra, Ezra, dot, it's okay if I give my email, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kanarick, at Brooklyn BP dot NYC dot gov. So also maybe I can just go type that in the
Yeah.
chat over
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And the turnaround is quick because Ezra's only with us till the end of this month. So in terms of next steps, we're trying to sort of zero in on this criteria so that we can start doing some mapping with the help of our land use team here in the office. So that's sort of what we're shifting to starting tomorrow.
Right.
But they'll get us your comments as soon as you can.
But the email instructions were to comment on the document, which people are doing already.
Yeah,
So
or you
feel
can
free to
email
do
it
that.
or whatever.
Yeah, or however you
Yeah.
do it. I just don't want to overwhelm Ezra if there's a lot coming in.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
We're public servants.
Yeah.
All of our information is
So
public
also, I just
domain.
I forgot to mention this earlier, but the next meeting is gonna be Monday, the 9th of September. We're taking off August as we voted last month. And the 9th of September is when we're gonna come back because the first weekend is Labor Day. So just to note that. That's it, right?
I think that's it.
Well, the legislative committee update, so the packaging, so we'll send an email around or Uli will. Or we'll send it from the Brooklyn SWAB, whatever, if you would like to make a call. Informing your assembly person of the of the SWAB's opinion. About Packaging Reduction Act. Ooh. Thank you, everyone, and what a great meeting. So we'll see you guys. Thank you, Uli.
Have a good summer.
Yeah, have a good summer and we'll see you but the Manhattan SWAB is meeting next week and we'll talk about this maybe, I don't know. But we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Good summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now she's talking.